On this Saturday night, impatience and anger during the pandemic. The protest over rights and restrictions. And the complicated fight to re-crush the curve.
It's like treating the population like children.
Out of control infernos along America's west coast.
It's a terrifying time right now.
How long these fires could last and the danger to Canada's air quality. The fight to leave Lesbos. Desperation and frustration among thousands of migrants. And the opponent that no playoffs can eliminate.
You had to have pretty deep pockets to get through this COVID-based leagues.
What's the permanent game plan for sports?
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Like many Canadians, we are keeping an eye on the upward trend of new COVID-19 cases in this country. Health officials are urging everyone to continue efforts to stop the spread as we navigate the reopening of schools and businesses. Despite the warnings and fears of a second wave, there are people ignoring restrictions intended to prevent new infections. But as Mike Drolet reports, in one province, being defiant about wearing a mask could land you with a hefty fine.
In Montreal, they marched for freedom. Hundreds of people claimed their rights are being trampled on by Quebec's insistence they wear masks to limit the spread of COVID-19. Another large rally in Ottawa was about gun rights, with roughly half of those attending ignoring mask and distancing rules. Yesterday, Canada's top doctors said it was events like these that may determine future pandemic decisions.
It's not a simple level at which someone is going to roll back a particular measure. But we just have to watch it really carefully so that things don't escalate to the extent that we can't manage.
As of now, they're managing, but COVID-19 is trending up. After the big wave in April and May, the number of COVID-19 cases in Canada dipped in the summer. But recent weeks have seen some spikes. Is it a second wave? That depends on how high the numbers go.
We're in the slow boil phase, the first climb of the first post-big wave. It's not pleasant to watch. People need to understand this is how it's going to be for the next few months until something miraculous happens, like the arrival of a highly efficacious vaccine.
And the numbers will almost certainly rise once new cases from the start of the school year are put into the system. That could take up to 2 weeks. And with cooler weather, there's less humidity, which means COVID-19 aerosol droplets hang in the air longer. Quebec, for one, isn't waiting. As of this weekend, police will be able to fine people disobeying mask laws up to $6,000. A heavy-handed approach epidemiologists aren't sure will work.
Unfortunately, it's like treating the population like children. But this is kind of where we are right now.
With anti-mask rallies, kids in school, and COVID complacency, what other options do the provinces have? Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
The concerns over a potential second wave are raising questions about the federal government's pandemic plan going forward. This week on the West Block, Mercedes Stephenson raises those worries with Health Minister Patty Hajdu and the Conservative health critic.
Canada recorded more than 600 daily cases of COVID-19 almost every day this week, numbers that we haven't seen since early June. And that has Canadians asking whether their government is doing enough to prepare for a spike in cases this fall, and whether that means tightening restrictions at the border or making sure that provinces, territories, and municipalities have what they need to respond. COVID-19 has already claimed the lives of more than 9,000 Canadians. With that in mind, I asked Health Minister Patty Hajdu whether she stands by her initial assessment that COVID-19 posed a very low risk to Canadians. Here's how she responded.
You know, we've always followed the advice of our public health officials, and in fact, at that time, the risk to Canadians was indeed low. There were very few cases in Canada. We were screening from the affected countries, and when it became apparent that this virus was spreading uncontrollably in countries that were not reporting any cases, we took even stronger measures. Of course, you know, there will be a full review of how Canada dealt with the pandemic, as I think all countries will be looking at in terms of strengthening their processes for future outbreaks. But at that particular time, time, of course, with very few cases and with a real strong global effort to try and contain the spread and not allow it to spread across the globe. At that time, the risk was indeed low to individual Canadians.
That response isn't good enough for Conservative health critic Michelle Rempel-Garner. She says the federal government failed to take all of the necessary precautions they could have, and that she worries the government is not prepared for what may come this fall. Here's what she told me.
The only thing that we have, in their own words, is that blunt tool of an economic shutdown that has cost so many Canadians their jobs. It's unacceptable. They're talking about reviews. We don't need a review. Canadians died, and we're in one of the worst economic crises that our country has ever seen. There's your review. Now they need a plan.
Also on the show, I'll check in with Globe and Mail Bureau Chief Bob Fife, talking about some of the scandals the Liberal government is facing, the shutdown of We This Week, the charges laid against a former Liberal MP, and Bill Morneau, former finance minister, facing allegations he broke elections law. All that and more coming up on the West Block.
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes. As if university or college isn't stressful enough. Add in the pandemic. Post-secondary institutions across the country are implementing a variety of approaches to keep students safe. Ross Lord looks at the difficult task of balancing normalcy and keeping COVID-19 in check.
Their school year hasn't even started, and these students at Acadia University are already being tested on their discipline. They're enduring 14 days of quarantine because they came to Nova Scotia from outside Atlantic Canada. During their isolation period, they're also required to take 3 COVID-19 tests.
Until you get your first result, you can't actually come outside. So this is the first time I've been able to come outside, and they have earlier. So I've been just kind of watching them from the window.
Schools like Acadia have an advantage. There's been little to no infection in the surrounding community that could spread onto campus. But they also face a big challenge: welcoming students from other parts of Canada and the world safely.
And making sure that they're self-isolating when they arrive, and also making sure that there's really strong surveillance in place, because we have seen that it doesn't take a lot for cases to start increasing. And so being able to find those quickly and respond quickly is really important.
RCMP have fined 4 Nova Scotia students $1,000 each for not self-isolating. 3 are from St. Francis Xavier University in Antigonish. 1 student is from Acadia. But when classes begin later this month, students will have some flexibility. Unlike many Canadian universities that are switching to online courses, Acadia and a few others are offering students a choice. They can study online or in class.
I'm honestly fine with doing it in person because so far everything else has been really set up super properly. So I'm not too concerned about that with mandatory masks and distancing.
Acadia declined to make anyone available for comment, but the student union has reservations.
We've spoken seriously to them because, frankly, returning to face-to-face classes, although it may be desired by students, is not the safest option.
Delicate positioning as post-secondary students and administrators navigate the pandemic. Ross Lord, Global News, Wolfville, Nova Scotia.
Oxford University and pharmaceutical firm AstraZeneca are set to resume clinical trials on a potential COVID-19 vaccine in Britain. Testing was paused for nearly a week after a volunteer in the UK developed unexplained symptoms of a rare spinal cord inflammation. Now that an independent safety review has been completed, the British trials will move forward. AstraZeneca says it's working with international health authorities to resume testing elsewhere, including in the U.S. Smoke from wildfires along the U.S. West Coast is hanging over parts of BC tonight. This is what it looks like in Vancouver. It's hard to tell, but behind the haze is the city's iconic Lionsgate Bridge. And this is what it looked like just a few days ago. At one point today, Vancouver had the worst air quality in the world. Environment Canada has issued air quality advisories for almost all of the province. The smoky skies are expected to stick around for several days. The situation is far worse south of the border. Dozens of wildfires are burning from Washington state all the way down to Mexico. At least 26 people have been killed and more than 1 million hectares have been scorched. As Jennifer Johnson explains, firefighters are struggling to get the wildfires under control.
The familiar glow of orange, a daily nightmare for millions of residents in Washington state, Oregon, and California. Hundreds of out-of-control wildfires are scorching the land, leaving death and destruction behind. In Washington state, Jamie and Jake Hyland were camping with their 1-year-old son Uriel and couldn't escape in time. The boy died, the parents badly burned.
In my worst dreams, I couldn't imagine what my sister and brother-in-law had to go through and to do everything they could to fight for their lives and to protect their child.
Oregon officials are preparing for mass fatalities. Dozens of people are missing. At least 500,000 residents have been told to leave their homes.
Everything I've ever owned, all my memories, stuff from my family is just all gone.
The heavy smoke is also threatening lives.
Right now, our air quality ranks the worst in the world due to these fires.
Residents are now dealing with constant heavy ash raining down in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's been horrible, actually. I have asthma, so it's been hard for me to breathe. I haven't gone out.
The infernos are wiping out entire communities. After the Bear Fire tore through Berry Creek, California, there was nothing left of the town's school, firehouse, and its only market.
I cried for a long time. And the worst day in my life when I heard that news.
California's governor and many scientists blame climate change for the worst wildfires in the state's history. Dry land and whipping winds have created a deadly combination, preventing those on the front lines from getting the upper hand.
There is no downtime because Mother Nature doesn't give us that.
Firefighters say they are facing the most explosive blazes they have ever seen and warn the land is so dry, these fires could burn well into the winter months. Jennifer Johnson, Global News.
Coming up, the migrant crisis after a fire at an overcrowded camp. What will the European Union do to help? At least 50 people are feared dead after an unregulated gold mine collapsed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Rescuers are digging through rubble which has blocked the mine's entrance. Days of torrential rain had flooded the tunnels. Witnesses say people tried to escape, but the water's flow was too powerful. Most of the victims are youth. The government is calling for 2 days of mourning. Thousands of asylum seekers have spent a fourth night sleeping outside after flames destroyed their camp. A series of deliberately set fires burned down the notoriously overcrowded Moria refugee camp this week. As Redmond Shannon explains, the migrants are now demanding to leave the Greek island of Lesbos.
Desperation and hunger in the European Union. Thousands of people stranded out in the open air with no shelter and little hope.
My family needs clothes, maybe some place to stay in, maybe food and water.
They are here because they used to live here. The infamous Moria refugee camp is no more. It burned down over 2 nights this week. 2 fires gutted the overcrowded holding facility, home to more than 12,000 people waiting for their asylum applications to be processed. Authorities suggest the fires were set by refugees protesting over COVID-19 lockdown measures. France and Germany are leading European efforts to house about 400 people, mostly unaccompanied children. And Greece is sending ships to house about 2,000 others. But many are not allowed to move because of COVID-19. New tents are being flown in because locals have set up roadblocks. We're fed up, says this community leader. We need facilities in which these people can live humanely, but also for there to be security for the surrounding villages. For 5 years, both locals and migrants have decried the camp as intolerable for very different reasons.
You know what started the fire? It was Europe. The European politicians started the fire in Moria camp because they didn't dare do their work. They let these people to go through all this for so many years and nothing changed.
The EU had tried to resettle migrants among its 27 members, but countries couldn't agree to a deal.
If each country take 1,000 refugees, the problem is solved.
In response to the fires, German Chancellor Angela Merkel says something must be done to establish a common European migration policy to share the burden. But hammering out any such deal will take time, something those sleeping in the ditches of Lesbos do not have. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
After months of delays and decades of ruthless war, the Afghan government and the Taliban are finally meeting face-to-face to talk peace. The U.S. helped broker a deal between the two sides, which includes Afghanistan agreeing to release 5,000 Taliban prisoners, while the Taliban says it would free 1,000 Afghan troops. The U.S. Secretary of State says he knows the negotiations will be tough, but is urging both sides to be patient and respectful.
I think everyone sitting here today knows that it took hard work and sacrifice to reach this moment, and it will require enormously hard work and sacrifice to keep it alive.
The deal also involves the U.S. withdrawing all of its troops from Afghanistan by May. Still ahead, an Ontario couple lost in the woods for days and then found.
You're watching Global National.
Toots Hibbert, one of reggae's founders, has died at the age of 77. Hibbert gave the music its name and helped make reggae an international movement through songs like Pressure Drop, Monkey Man, and Funky Kingston. Hibbert passed away in hospital in Jamaica, surrounded by family. They didn't say how he died, but the reggae giant was hospitalized last month after showing symptoms consistent with the coronavirus. After spending nearly 50 years together, an Ontario couple's decision to split up may have saved their lives. The two were hiking in the woods and got lost. It was 4 days before they decided the only way to get out was to separate. Each took a different route. Karen Lieberman shows us how they managed to get back together again.
Cecilia and Ted Naismith, an Ontario couple in their 70s, are recovering from what can only be described as a harrowing ordeal.
I was prepared to accept that I didn't see any way out.
Their story has a happy ending, but it's how they went from lost to found that makes it interesting.
You don't lose hope. You should always try to find your way out.
4 days and 3 nights alone in the woods. How one survives that, says this OPP officer, is nothing short of a miracle.
In my experience, I would say it's very rare that basically everything was against him, but he had the will to push on.
It was Ted's disappearance that sparked the massive search, and it was all thanks to Cecilia.
In my opinion, she's the hero in this story.
The two went missing in the township of Lake of Bays, located near Huntsville in the Muskoka region, some 2.5 hours north of Toronto. The couple had been staying at a cabin on Oxbow Lake. It's been in the family for a long time, so Ted knows the area well. A picnic in the nearby woods seemed like a good idea. But this is what they were facing.
Very thick bush, steep inclines, bodies of water, whether it be lakes, rivers, everywhere, very, very wet. Wet rocks, lots of cliffs.
If you're wondering about a cell phone, neither Ted nor Cecilia brought one. They also hadn't alerted friends and family. So when they got lost returning to the cabin, no one knew.
As long as I could keep walking, I wanted to keep walking. You got to try every chance you have.
Ted decided the couple should separate to search for help.
I took a lucky turn on an ATV trail, and that's how I got out.
Cecilia reported her husband missing. By then, it was Thursday. They'd set out on Monday.
Time is definitely against us in that case.
We can't show you the search because a camera crew couldn't make it through the bush the way the OPP did, by land, air, and water.
And I could hear the helicopters overhead, but they couldn't see me and I couldn't see them.
Here is what Ted did see.
These 3 different types of bear. There was one cub. The first one I ran into was a mother and a cub.
It was just 9 degrees Celsius and stormy, but the rescuers were tireless.
They glanced over and he actually has a bald head, and when their flashlights hit him, he was right there.
Ted had been found hurting from his time in the woods and hypothermic.
You should know, Cecilia, that you saved his life by doing what you did, getting out of the woods.
Together for nearly 50 years, it was their brief time apart that led them back together. Karen Lieberman, Global News.
Up next, can pro sports score a sustainable pandemic plan? The Toronto Raptors and their fans are feeling heartbroken today. Their dream of winning another NBA championship is now over after the Boston Celtics won Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinal last night. But no matter who triumphs with the trophy and no matter the league, the cloud of COVID-19 will still hang over them. Morgan Campbell tonight on the sustainability of sports during the pandemic.
This is Jurassic Park, the moment the Toronto Raptors clinched the 2019 NBA championship as people flooded streets across Canada. Fast forward to 2020, like many other things this year, sports are looking much different, and so are viewing parties. Not only did the Raps lose their title, but they did it without fans in the stands.
It's disappointing. We're glad we got it to 7, but, you know, it was weird circumstances this year.
You know, Celtics came strong, and their defense, I do think, was stronger than the Raptors' defense.
Off the hard court, the team and its management are looking ahead to next season.
Pretty much the whole rest of everything else we did this year, we played awesome, you know, with overcoming a lot and just never really wavered.
Is this bubble idea sustainable into the new season? I don't think it is.
Experts say while bubbling appears to have worked so far with the NHL and the NBA, the financial effect is bound to take a toll.
The marketing, the hospitality, you know, the bums and seats, the tickets, things like that are really going to hurt the smaller teams. But remember, what really drives all these leagues is TV revenue.
There is no doubt organizations are looking to the National Football League to determine if fans can in fact return to stadiums.
The NFL is taking a huge risk right now by doing this.
The defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs kicked off the 2020 NFL season Thursday night. They did so in front of about 17,000 fans. That's 22% of Arrowhead Stadium's capacity.
I think all the other sports owners are sitting back and saying, we really hope this goes well for you, because then we can start to introduce the same thing.
But whether that would be something most fans would accept,
we'll come back and take it next year. That's no problem.
Or other major leagues would adopt is still up for debate. Morgan Campbell, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is this pair of sculptured puffins in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. We'd love to see your corner of this country, so email your photos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.